So the first question that we got was from someone called Brendan, and he was wondering, as websites and web capabilities get better, will that negate the need for apps completely? Are we wasting our time sitting here chatting about apps? So maybe Claire or Tony would like to jump on that?
Yeah, I'll take that. Do you want
Yeah?
grab a mic?
Yeah, there's 3 mics there.
I'll assume that you're talking about mobile apps with the question, and I really don't think that it will. I think if you look at a lot of the reason, the guys spoke earlier about building across one kind of framework that would allow you to build apps on multiple platforms, and the big problem there is that different phones and different handsets have different capabilities. So iOS has certain access levels. You can access the accelerometer, you can access the camera. It's different with Windows, it's different with Android, and it's never going to be something that's going to be fully standardized at a browser level. They are getting better standards-wise at doing that, but it's Apple, for example, are never going to give you access from the browser to a lot of those capabilities. So I don't think that it's going to.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
A good comparison is to say, comparing something like Microsoft Word that you use natively on your PC to maybe Google Docs, for example. So using the kind of online version of a word processor. That's a bit like the analogy that you might use of a mobile app, a native mobile app versus a web browser-based application. It's not exactly the same, but one is designed very specifically for the utility, and it's using all the kind of native features that work well. So I would agree with Tony that it's going to take some time to catch up and may never, because it isn't standard enough across the phones.
I would say kind of it depends on the app. So there's a whole load of apps out there that work perfectly fine as mobile apps and mobile web pages, and everyone is rushing to build an app. I mean, I talk to small businesses and they're like, "How can I get an app built? Why do you want an app?" I don't know why I want an app. I just need one because everyone has one. And that's ridiculous. It's like the first bubble that the web pages went through when web developers were out there. So I think it depends on the app. If you need an app to do accelerometer, use the accelerometer and use the functions of the phone, very few of them do, to be honest. I mean, some of them do, but not many, and some of them are kind of gratuitously done. Kind of you don't really need it. So I would say it depends, and I think it'll get better. I think the mobile experience, the web experience will get better, and so I think there will be cases when you need it and cases when you don't.
Brilliant, thanks, Claire. Anyone else? No? Claire, in your presentation you had some very sobering statistics in terms of the economic viability of apps.
Sobering, yes.
Does anyone else on this panel have anything to say on that? Any thoughts from what Claire was saying? 0.01%, was it, by 2000?
Well, I think that was also taking into account the fact that people will spend more on building them as well. So yeah, I mean it's not that you won't earn any money, it's just how much.
Yeah, I'd say for one of the things that we were really surprised by from our experience is the extent you have to kind of work at promoting your app after you release it, that it really doesn't just happen by itself. We were very fortunate in that our app got featured soon after the release by Apple as an editor's pick, and we got a big spike with the downloads and everything, and the app won a few awards as well, which also produced spikes. But we noticed immediately after that, it just kind of dovetailed into or kind of essentially flatlined, and we really have had to work over the last kind of 6 months or so since the app came out to keep the momentum going and trying to get publicity and press releases out there and anything just to keep awareness up about the app.
Yeah, just on that, I suppose one thing we went through when we launched Tilltonic initially, we wanted to just get loads of points on the board in terms of downloads, just because we just wanted the buzz of it, So we came up with this really, interesting way of marketing it, and we got 3,000 downloads in a really short space of time, about 2 or 3 weeks. But we preempted it, but one of the biggest things with apps is user retention and not actually downloads. I can download an app and then delete it 5 minutes later, and it doesn't really mean anything. I'm not a user of that app, and the developer has no opportunity to monetize off me ever again. So I think the focus needs to be more on retention and less on downloads, as we very rapidly learned.
Did you see any positive I think Michael, he had a question about how influential are reviews. Did you see that the reviews you were getting, if they were positive, had a positive impact on how many more people were downloading your app, or did you feel that that was almost just like a nice pat on the back for yourself?
Yeah, I think the reviews are extremely helpful. I know just from my own personal experience, if I'm ever considering downloading an app, I always have a look at the reviews. We the app developers built in some analytics into the app where we could kind of monitor how people were using it, and also we could send them questionnaires as well. So we actually sent out a questionnaire recently to try and establish how people were hearing about the app, and it was very interesting. A lot of people were downloading it through referrals from other people. Quite a bit from the App Store as well. That was probably one of the big areas, and then hardly anything from the advertising that we've done, and hardly anything from we did a few deals with like pregnancy type magazines to get the app featured, which we worked really hard to get, and hardly anybody downloaded the face in that. So that's actually another thing I'd recommend, trying to set up your app in such a way that you can kind of learn from the experience as you go, instead of just kind of winging it and trying to figure out what you're doing.
I want to add into that. So we've been working with people around this as well, and you start off by saying, yeah, you should get some reviews. There's a kind of a dual thing going on at the moment, because that became popular, and then there were a few people who kind of were gaming systems and having all their friends review it 50 times, and you can kind of spot that, or sometimes you can't, and it actually kind of spoils the whole trust basis that's done on, and that's difficult. I was talking to another company that do kind of marketing for apps, and they gave me a list of 5 things, and I was trying to think about the 5 things that you do, and I can't think of them all, but I can think of 2 at least, which I was surprised about. One was the name of your app. The name of your app is incredibly important, and they were saying things like, go on to Google Analytics, find out what the search words are. Name your app after the search word that's closest to what you want to build, because then when people search in the App Store, they're more likely to hit your app, right? So things like that. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's brilliant. And the second thing was around the searchability. There's the SEO around your app, and to do that outside the App Store, and to make sure that you almost treat it like a web page. If you're doing kind of promotions for a web page, you have to put as much effort into doing that and point to your app in the App Store, so people have a path to find it. And they were 2 things that I hadn't really thought of to begin with, and they said that they were some of the big levers to actually get attention and downloads and things like that.
Brilliant. I have a question here, probably Susan maybe. Someone who was asking, there's a lot of teach yourself how to code in 30 days, learn how to code while you're sleeping, whatever. It's very popular at the moment to talk about how everyone should learn to code, and there's some Steve Jobs quote that, if you don't, then you'll be at a loss in your whole life. What do you think about that in terms of, should people who are interested in building apps, should they try and learn how to code? Should they just hire someone from the straight off? What do you think?
Okay, how to answer that? It kind of depends on what type of app you're talking about. If you're talking about an app that's kind of content, static content, if you like, that doesn't do loads of kind of searches and data entry and taking data, if it's about content, then you may be able to go the route where you don't need to go and do detailed coding, but you can use it almost like a configuration tool that Claire described, which was App Studio for Windows or App Inventor for Android and so on. You can get that far, a bit like creating a dynamic slideshow or something. So it's a very close analogy to the website early days, if you've got a sort of static app. Once you get into a dynamic app, which is one where you've got a kind of persistent bunch of data underneath. Stuff is changing, the users are entering data, the stuff going off to a remote server because you're going to share data with others. You're really getting into dynamic coding. You're not going to be doing that as a non-coder, so you're going to need to get people with expertise. In terms of learning coding yourself, yes, the front-end static stuff, yes. The back-end stuff is more heavy duty, you're going to need.
It's great fun too, really it is. Really is.
Yes, we love it.
I'd come in on that as well. I think on the point you made about it being great fun, I think people have, and maybe I contributed to this in the slide, and I compared the front end and then the dynamic language, and the dynamic language is much more complicated. But it's really, there seems to be this kind of attitude that you need to be like really into maths or physics or like a geek to code, and you really, really don't. I came at it from the point of view as I just wanted to make money online, and that's how I got into it. And I learned to build stuff, and just gradually more and more started to learn more and more. And I learned that I didn't need to be like, I'm not super clever at maths or physics or any of that sort of stuff. And it's not actually that complicated. It's HTML and CSS is really, really simple. Dynamic languages are a little bit more complicated, but they're still not. That said, I would recommend that there is a few websites out there. There's the likes of Code Academy, Treehouse, that all have very good. But I think the best way to learn is, those things are great to a certain point, but really you need to have something in mind that you want to build, because otherwise you'll go through it. It's the same with learning a language. You go through a few lessons and you think you're doing great, and you are, but you forget it and you don't come back, and you don't have something to make you come back every day. If you want to actually go and build something, that's by far the best way to learn.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, I think it's probably, and it's easier than people think, I think, to build an app, to just make it work. But it's really hard to make a beautiful, well-designed app. I mean, if I had to think about what I could learn, it'd be much harder for me to learn how to be a really good creative person than it would, with really great user experience and all that kind of thing, than it would to be actually learn how to build the app. So if you've got skills in that side of the house, you're probably much further along than the people who are technical. It would be my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, just coming at it from, I suppose, a different perspective. What we've kind of learned. Sorry. So we have a CTO, he's our developer, and one thing we've learned is, building an app. If you want to build an app that's got a lot of potential, globally, if you want to get a lot of downloads and all that, you really need to understand exactly what the user, how they are going to use the app. So, for example, we design mobile tills, basically. So we really need to understand from start to finish how retailers operate and what they do. And then we go to the coder, give them, an idea of what's required, rather than just diving in and designing something without really understanding what the customer wants.
Thanks very much. One more question here, and then I'll open it up to the floor. Data protection issues. Someone wanted to know, anyone have any tips about keeping data safe? Obviously, eBay had a fun scare, right? I don't know what you call it, like hack recently. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a pretty tricky one. I think the more and more we've seen over the last few months, and even the last year, the likes of the NSA in the States and the GCHQ, and it, like, even if your data is secured, it's not really, it's never secured. The only things that I can say, I mean, I personally haven't seen any massive ramifications. That's not to say that you shouldn't be super careful about what you do. Like, going further than having a very secure password and not using the same password and all your stuff, I'm not really sure how much further you can go. There is a movement of, I can't remember what the name for it is, but it's a method of data storage whereby you store all your data locally. So this is something that would take mass adoption and probably won't even come into the mainstream over the next year or two. But it is a potential fix to that problem. So the idea is you go to a website, you sign in, and there's a standardized set of protocols, but all of the data is stored in your own local machine. So the provider that you use, obviously it won't work for stuff like Dropbox or files, but anything where you're storing information, that's another thing that we might see pop up over the next while. Beyond that, I don't know. It's a very tricky question.
Claire, do you want to jump in?
Sorry, just again, I think as well, the fact that there's kind of more of a move to go towards frameworks and kind of common tool sets will help that, because generally speaking, if you're, some of these frameworks and things kind of give you a layer of stuff that's already done for you, and then you just do this standard way of doing whatever you're doing, maybe hope that was sensible, but the idea being that kind of everyone's in the same boat then. So there's always kind of, if there's anyone kind of figured out that someone's done something bad, there's like top 10 tricks to stay secure on such and such a platform, and it helps people, because sometimes if you build everything from scratch because you just feel the need, or it's you can, it means that you may have done something that's just a little bit different than what everyone else did. And at least if you've done what everyone else did, then you'll be aware of what you've done, and everyone else who comes after you will know what you've done. And that maybe provides some help for people if you're using standard tools or the ones that are most popular or whatever.
Great, thanks so much. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. Don't know if anyone has any questions. If not, that's fine. No, we're good. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, silly questions. Like, for example.
Sorry, I'll get you.
Hi, how are you? For example, as an independent developer, if I want to put an app out there in the market, in the iOS store, iTunes store, what do you think is better, or for users that you have seen a lot of apps, like to use your own name or to use like a company name? Because that's something that gives me like, if you need a company name, that would make the app more popular. You know, if you're an independent developer, that's something that you need to consider. What or you guys, what do you think?
Yeah, we've always rolled with company names, registered companies, if that answers your question.
Yeah, but do you think that common names, like a normal person name, would be less popular than big ones, or that doesn't matter?
I'm not sure if, like, as a consumer of apps, I'm not sure if it'd put me off buying an app, you know, or if I can't speak generally because I don't know, but personally, I don't think so.
To remember to speak into this. I think it also depends on what the target market is of the app. If it's a consumer app as opposed to a business app, I would think that it's not going to matter much, and especially if it's an international audience, these things become meaningless anyway. If it's a business app, then there's a sort of different case there. You have to defend your decision to choose a particular app, so perhaps it becomes more important then. Yeah, so it depends on the market.
And what your name is. I mean, if you've got a hard to pronounce name that's not very repeatable, that won't work. No one will be able to spell it or find it or search for it. But if your name is Toka Boka, I'd go for it.
Thanks so much. And thanks to everyone who tweeted us questions and came up to us at the info questions. Thanks to all our speakers. They did an amazing job. I know a lot of work went into all those slides and all those presentations, so I think everyone deserves a round of applause.